Thanks, Kim. Welcome. Thanks, everybody, again for coming. Our program today is entitled The Complete Streets Master Plan with Stacey Bannerjee, the chair of the Complete Streets Commission. It's my pleasure to introduce Stacey. Stacey's currently the chair. She's been on the commission for the past 5 years. She was appointed by City Council around the time the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission was renamed to the Complete Streets Commission. Prior to that time period, Stacey served as the Safe Routes to School chair on her son's elementary school parent-teacher organization. Today, she also serves as the city's representative on the VTA Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and is currently the chair of that committee. In addition, she has been involved with county public health, traffic safety communities network. So she has a broad background of experience, and we're very excited to hear her presentation. Stacey.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much for everyone welcoming me here today and joining us. So I'm happy, of course, to speak to any community group, and the one I'm most popular with actually is the Scouts and the Boy Scouts, but I love speaking to any community group anytime. So I wanted to give you a brief introduction to the Complete Streets Commission. I know David shared a few things with me that would be helpful if I covered for you. And one of those is sort of the history of the Complete Streets Commission. So the commission was formed around 5 years ago. Really, it was the combination of renaming the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission and giving it some expanded responsibilities. So the expanded responsibilities were moving from advisory of bicycle and pedestrian to advisory to the city council for multimodal transportation. So adding vehicle and transit to that. It also moved from the Planning Commission into the Streets Commission, the transportation review of the development projects, most of them that the Planning Commission would be reviewing. And then we, of course, just generally advise the council on policy, budget, anything related to transportation. I think the commission's been around a very long time as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Per some state requirements, cities do have to have a commission or committee that advises council on bicycle issues. I mean, you could have it assigned to the Library Commission if you wanted, but most cities have some form of streets commission. I think before our commission and before the Planning Commission reviewed the development projects, there was a separate traffic commission, and they reviewed development. They had more traffic responsibility, not necessarily bicycle pedestrian exclusively. So there's a long history of having this focus in the city. I think the next thing I want to share is our commission has what we call a 5-year work plan, but we really need to rename it to a 10-year work plan. And we've been talking about it as a 5 to 10-year work plan. That work plan has 4 priorities. We review the work, update the work plan every year, and we share it with council as they're forming their annual city council priorities. And then we share it with council again right before our commission's annual joint meeting with city council. So in our work plan, our 4 priorities are: 1 is around having safe multimodal transportation in the city. 2 is around addressing the long-term cumulative impact of development on traffic. 3 is around community engagement, because that's very important to our commission. I think to the city in general, but our commission calls this out. And the 4th one is around funding and securing funding for transportation projects, including grant funding from outside sources. So that's how we look at our big picture. So the next thing David asked me to talk about is the Complete Streets Master Plan. So let me tell you how the Complete Streets Master Plan fits into our big picture. The Complete Streets Master Plan is one item of several within our first goal, which is around safe multimodal transportation. So within safe multimodal transportation, we have the Complete Streets Master Plan. We have the pavement program. This is where we do street resurfacing and all the asphalt and thing that goes on the streets to keep the condition of the streets good. We have Safe Routes to School program, including education and encouragement, which is a new program for the city over the last couple of years. We have traffic calming, and we have coordination with regional other jurisdictions, transportation needs. And those are the items in our first priority around safe multimodal transportation. So what you'll see is the Complete Streets Master Plan is not a master plan for everything the Complete Streets Commission does. It's just one component of the things we do. Let me talk about the Complete Streets Master Plan a little bit more, how it came about, what it is. So this Complete Streets Master Plan, the goal was originally it was going to be 4 things. Number 1, we had existing master plans for bicycles and pedestrians. So here's the big bicycle transportation plan from 2012. Here's it's even bigger, the pedestrian master plan from August 2015. And I didn't waste a tree on these, Gary. These came from when the county hosted the Expressway 2040 planning things, and they were reference manuals, and they were left over, and they were headed for the recycle bin, and they became my permanent copies.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So that was one purpose of the Complete Streets Master Plan, was to merge those two, update and merge those two plans together. Typically, you're supposed to update your bicycle plan about every 5 years. When you apply for grants, a lot of people ask, when did you have your plan updated? So it's important to have updated. And these plans sort of reflect, I don't want to say a vision, but it's kind of a plan for everything related to its scope. It's probably not everything that's going to get done this year or next year or in 5 years or even 10 years, but it kind of says where we're going in the city, and then it gets reviewed every so often, and there's changes that were made from the previous plan into the current one. The second part of the Complete Streets Master Plan was a Safe Routes to School. It has 2 components. Safe Routes to School maps were updated. The city had existing maps for several actually for LASD schools and for Montclair Elementary. So the mapping, those maps were updated because they hadn't been updated in a very long time. And a few new maps were added for schools that Los Altos residents attend, public schools that weren't in there before, including maps for middle schools and high schools. And then there was also some planning done for quick hit, short-term things that could be done on school routes, striping, signing improvements that could make it safer for the kids going to and from school. And the next component of the Complete Streets Master Plan was the concept plan line drawings. And the concept plan line drawings were originally set out as selecting, I think it was originally supposed to be 10 to 12 places in the city that we knew early on that had issues that we wanted to focus on, where we wanted to drill in and give examples to the community what improvements could be done, and get the community's input on those and update the maps. I think council added several locations near the El Camino Real back by Los Altos High School into that. And then, and let me come to the community feedback in a minute. But the final thing that was originally part of the Complete Streets Master Plan was transit. But at one point when the master plan, when we had to go back to council and ask for an additional 15K, transit was cut out of the plan by council. So that isn't in our Complete Streets Master Plan. And that was done by a previous council and a couple councils ago, or a council back. So the Complete Streets Master Plan, we tried to get feedback from across the city. I think things like, I think it was probably promoted in the newspaper. It was promoted to schools, to promote to families. It was, and a postcard was sent to all the residents and in Los Altos. There was a couple ways of giving feedback. One was there was an interactive map. You could enter your feedback on an interactive map. There was a survey you could enter, you could take a survey. There was community meetings. You could attend a community meeting and give your feedback. It came on the Complete Streets Commission agenda multiple times. You could come and make public comments there. And then of course, in Los Altos, there's always the opportunity to contact our friendly staff people directly and give them your feedback. So there was a large engagement process. And we did have engagement with each of the concept plan line drawings. I can't remember if those were done in 3 or 4 different Zoom sessions. So they had separate ones in each session, and people from the different neighborhoods were coming on and off those meetings. Some of those meetings had well over 100 people at them, and some of them were very interactive. I think some of the concept plan line drawings would be moving forward, and some would not. And I forget in the final version of the plan if they noted which ones we want to try to take to the next step and which ones were determined based upon community input that might not go farther. I think, let me talk about the Complete Streets Master Plan a little bit more. Many cities who merge a Complete Streets Master Plan call it the Active Transportation Plan. In Los Altos, we went with the Complete Streets Master Plan. There was notion of naming it that, and then having a series of connected plans. So the Complete Streets Master Plan, where we're focusing on multimodal transportation, and it also, this plan has also some improvements that will help with traffic or traffic calming, but a second plan that focuses on traffic calming, and then maybe some other series of plans. I think we have traffic calming, neighborhood traffic management fitting together. Now, of course, those other 2 plans that I mentioned, there are existing plans for that. They are also old and they have not been updated. It's of course in our long range work plan to update those, but I can't tell you at this point exactly when we're going to do that. Now, specifically what's in the master plan, I think there's a page up in the beginning of the plan that kind of gives you a chapter by chapter summary. But what you find in all of these, any city that does a bicycle master plan or an active transportation plan, and in our case, a Complete Streets Master Plan, you will find a summary of existing conditions. And that is gathered by getting community input and by engineers reviewing the existing situation or the information that a jurisdiction has available to it. You will find that some of these plans have funding or grant ideas of grants you could go after. And they all have recommendations of what bicycle and pedestrian and any other traffic things that come up, but that you could recommend, that you recommend doing. Typically, they prioritize projects, which our master plan does, and they suggest a funding, like how much they think it'll cost for that specific project. I think in the in our master plan, we asked the agency that we had a vendor named Alta Design that worked with us on this. We made sure we had clear purpose of what our priorities were. We made sure that we had clear scoring on how a project became a priority. And that was done at, discussion was had at a commission meeting, and members of the public who were there at the time, we had a very interactive engagement where you had an online tool that you could put your feedback in and put your prioritizations in. And so that's how some of the scoring came about for the prioritized projects. And you'll see a list in our master plan, a list of prioritized pedestrian projects and a list of prioritized bicycle projects. I think, David, I didn't time myself for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but I'm going to stop there, I think, and maybe ask you, did I miss anything that you wanted me to cover? And then I know you have questions for me.
No, it's an excellent presentation of, this is exactly what we were looking for. And, thanks very much. And we are tracking tracking well on our timing. So I'm going to, ask you some questions. And the first one is, what are the reasons that you originally got involved in this endeavor?
Great question. When I was walking with my son to school when he was in first grade, the crosswalk by my home. And of course, when you're on the commission, there are rules about, do we participate in things near our home or not? And on streets, there are things we are allowed to participate on, and then there are things we are not. And we try to seek the city attorney's opinion on when we should and shouldn't participate. But because I'm telling something near my house, I just want to make sure that disclaimer is out there and it applies to everything I say today. So when my son was in first grade, we were walking to school, and in the crosswalk right by our house, which is incidentally right by Foothill Expressway, you had to get to the middle of the road before you could see around the vehicle stopped waiting for a traffic signal if you were able to make it across the other way. It was kind of like Frogger. And of course, there were cars headed towards the expressway, more cars than lanes available. So they just made their own lane and squeezed out the bicycles, but hey. So in the middle of the road, you're peeking around and see cars are coming. First couple go past. Next one stops. A mom. My son knows the mom. She waves us through. My son grabs my hand and starts walking. And I had the foresight to look behind her and pause to make sure the car behind her was going to stop. It did not. It rear-ended her, and pushed her into the crosswalk. And had we gone, had my son been by himself, had any other kid been there, they would have been laying on the pavement and then on the ambulance, and God knows. Now, thankfully we weren't, and thankfully no one else was, and thankfully all parents knew this location was notorious. There have been people hit there, and including cyclists. But it could be worse. And but parents then, as you very well know, Gary, and as I heard another mom say recently, it's not okay when we hear parents say, I drive my kids to school because it's not safe. But that's what happens. And that's what happens in our city. And anyway, I took the kids out of the cars and got everybody down to school because get them there on time and get them out of, try not to make it a bigger reaction for them. And then I went to the principal's office and said, this happened. I thought that's all I had to do. Kim, that's a far stretch from what has to do when. So a year later, it gets better. Memorial Day weekend, around 6 a.m, I awoke and I thought there was an earthquake. But I said, wait a minute, that's right there. And I don't think an earthquake is like that. And it's not from all sides. And then a second noise. I was like, that's my house. So I got up, walked down the hallway, and looked out our office towards the pond. And what do you know? A car had crashed into my house, going officially, according to the police report, in excess of 80 miles an hour. Also Foothill Expressway. My husband's friends were visiting from India for the weekend, and things blew up, including a concrete wall and the rebar in it. And I'm really glad they were up till 4 a.m. And you can imagine that maybe they had something to drink. And they were out, unlike me, they were sound asleep and out of it for longer. And their heads were low and the things flew over their head. And there was screams afterwards and there were cuts of glass. And we are just thankful that it was not any worse. So after that, I decided to find out who my lovely city council was. My father, I grew up in a rural area of Minnesota, served on the town, it's a township then, and you serve on the town hall board, served on the town hall board. So I knew you take these problems to some elected official. So I decided I was a busy mom who at that time worked full-time in the tech industry, and I wasn't as involved here. But I decided to get involved. So I happened to look up the city council agenda and I saw that there was a foothill crossing on the agenda near University in North Los Altos on the agenda. So I marched myself down to city council when Jeannie Bruins was mayor. And I said, but there's some other places that are problems for kids going to school. And Jeannie sent Cedric out to see me. And we looked at the crossing that was right where my son and I almost got hit on the way to school near the expressway. And Cedric said to me, and I apologize if this is a long story, but this is the story of how I got involved. Cedric said to me, the easiest thing would be to get a crossing guard in this intersection. So I said, how do you get a crossing guard? So it turns out I live in the southern part of the city and I'm in the Cupertino Union School District in the Fremont Union High School District. So it turns out you have to change who's on the school board, elect somebody else to get a majority on the school board so you can comply with the city's program for crossing guards to get a crossing guard. And that's what we had to do. And it took a couple of years. Well, maybe that took a year and then another couple of years because the city's crossing guard program used to be such that they signed a joint agreement with the school districts and the school districts had to pay an administrative fee to the city, and Cupertino Union School District refused to sign the agreement. So for many years, the southern part of the city went without crossing guards because of this. And right next to the school, parents volunteered every single morning, year after year, to do this. For locations like my house, the crossing near my house, which is about 0.2 or 0.3 miles from the school, there was no parent to stand there every day. And so we had no crossing guard. Anyway, there now is a crossing guard, and this procedure is now out of there. We had to do some things in the interim compromising, and we did to get crossing guards in place, but now this thing is out of there. And once I spent so much of my life trying to get the crossing guard there and they appeared, you've opened, I don't know if it's a Pandora's box or a can of worms, but one thing leads to another. And you realize that there's so much more improvement needed than a crossing guard. And then you start hearing from more people in more locations throughout the city. And then in our situation in the South, once the kids go to middle school and high school, they're going through in a half-a-mile stretch. They go from the city of Los Altos, they cross the expressway, which belongs to Santa Clara County. They then hit by Trader Joe's, the city of Cupertino. Then they cross over the Stevens Creek, which is the water controlled. Then they hit into Sunnyvale. Then they hit 85, which is a Caltrans jurisdiction. So in a half a mile, we have these 5 or 6 jurisdictions. And what happens, Kim, when you have 5 or 6 jurisdictions? Everybody's pointing at everybody. So that's been very difficult as well. We asked Joe Simidian for help, and there is a Homestead Road Corridor Safe Routes to School project that runs from Foothill Expressway down past Homestead High School. There's like some design plans in place, and of course, there's no funding. Unfortunately, it hasn't been scoring so well in grant applications because we're not in equity priority communities, but there's an incredible need. I apologize, that's a long answer, but this is my personal story of how I landed here. And of course, I didn't even mention my husband who used to bicycle to work in Mountain View, and he was hit on Grant Road on his bike, also unreported. So there we are.
Wow. Well, thank you, and
Yeah.
don't apologize. This is it's exactly why people, I think, in my opinion, why they get involved in civic enterprise, to try to make it a better place for all of us to live. So we appreciate, sorry that you have to go through that, but we very much appreciate your involvement. Wow. What is the briefly, in your what you've learned from being on the commission, what is the history of accidents of children going to and from school? Not a case by case, but do you have any statistics so that everybody on this, in this Zoom can get a sense of the scope of the problem?
Yeah. So the scope of the problem is huge. The statistics are not easily available, or not really available because nobody's tracking them. So let me tell you what is available. There is collision data. The police, when there's an official collision, have write a report. These reports get aggregated at the state level. There's UC Berkeley has something called TIMS. It's like a collision database. It's available to the public if you get a login. Anybody can go on there and get a login. And you can sort it by bicycle pedestrian, was a bicycle pedestrian involved? Like, what are the age of people, et cetera, by city. And typically they don't have the past year's data in there. It takes a while to flow in, but you can see where these reported collisions are. Now, is everything in there? I don't know. Some people have asked that, and I can't speak for the police, or what gets reported and what doesn't. There may be official criteria. So if you open that thing up, what you will largely see in Los Altos is our patterns of collisions are on our busy roads. Foothill Expressway, El Camino Real, San Antonio Road, some of the other bigger streets will also have them as well. You will also see, and they're often at intersections. You will also see collisions that involve bicycle and pedestrians, sometimes just in different parts on a street. There's one here, one there. They're not necessarily, a larger pattern in those. Then I will say that a lot of people don't report collisions. So the story that I told about the rear ending and two cars pushing into the crosswalk, that was reported to the insurance company, but it wasn't officially reported to the city by the drivers. And I didn't know that because I left the scene, and they knew who I was as the witness if I was needed. And I reported to the principal,
Right.
A lot of things don't get reported. And the other thing that doesn't get counted ever, or is very hard to count, and some people try to start looking at it, but it's the near misses. And so my son and I, as a pedestrians, being basically almost hit that day, it doesn't count, doesn't show up, isn't in the data. And then the final thing I will say is, repeating what I said before, a lot of people drive their kids to school because they don't want them to get hit on their bike. And while my son walked to elementary school because we were close, I am one of those parents who drove my kid to school. And I drove him to school in 6th grade and the first half to 7th grade, and then COVID hit. And then I drove him to school in 9th grade. And this year he is biking to school. And every day I say a little prayer that he'll be okay. And one night this week, I am a mom, and he was at robotics and it was dark and he was not answering his phone. And I went and sat in the parking lot because your bike is going in the car. You are not going home without lights, with wearing dark clothing, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. this is speaking for yourself and not on behalf of the Complete Streets Commission. What do you personally see as the priorities of the master plan? What do you feel should be approached as the first 4 priorities?
Yeah, good question, David. I think the Streets Commission completed this master plan long before council approved it. I generally felt when you look at the priorities in the bicycle and pedestrian categories, there's a good set of priorities there. So I'm happy with what has been the specifics within projects within the categories prioritized. And the other footnote that I will make, because there were some conversations of this when we were doing the plan, and also conversations when the commission was asked to give our input on what priority areas are. And of course, this is my personal opinion too, but that we also need to have geographic equity when we implement the plan.
Sounds good. If everyone doesn't know, the plan is available, online. It is, I think, a little over 250 pages. It's daunting, but a lot of those pages are maps. So don't be dissuaded from looking at it. This is my personal opinion. It's an important, very important thing that the city did, that the commission came up with and the city did adopt. I have 2 more questions. The first is, in terms of the priorities of kids getting to school safely, what do you believe are the most important facets of the master plan that should be enacted?
Yeah, so I think this is the most important thing we can do, is focus on kids getting to school safely. I think they don't have the option to drive themselves, and sometimes parents are busy and aren't there after school and they need a way home. And this is a time in their lives when if we teach them to walk and bike, it can become a lifelong habit. And if we don't do it, it won't. And as the same applies to transit. So that's really important. And I'll actually say we also got the 51 bus to try to come past the Cupertino Middle School and Homestead High. And my son actually, once that happened, for the last half of 6th grade or 7th grade, before the pandemic came, once the bus started doing that, was riding the bus home in the afternoon. The morning schedule wasn't super coordinated, but it's important to teach our kids to do these things. I think the other thing that I do think we should take on, and I know this master plan added some education and encouragement elements, and the city is trying to start that, but what is missing, not just in Los Altos, but in many, Palo Alto has it, but what's missing in most cities in California, or areas of anywhere in California, is bicycle and pedestrian education. You don't get to drive a car without a license. And to get that license, you have to take 2 tests. One is behind the wheel and one is a written test. No such thing is the case for bicycles. Yet we let these kids on the street when they're young, they're immature, they have no seatbelt, they have no pounds of steel around them. They just have their helmet, hopefully, and hopefully they have it on right. And we put them on the street with the cars. And then compound in distracted driving, mobile phones that drivers use now, whether it's handheld or even they're punching the button, their eyes are off the road. Everybody's in a rush. It's very difficult for these kids. There are many priorities for safe routes to school, so I cannot enumerate them. I think each school community will have their own 3 priorities. I think that I know that the schools in the South have been very good at telling the city, these are our 3 to 5 priorities. I think that that's also a way for the city to be informed on what's most important, is what the parents are saying for school routes.
Got it. Good. My final question before I open up to questions from the audience. There recently has been a lot of concern about accidents at Edith and Foothill, and at Main and at the Main and Foothill intersections. It's hopefully it won't be that long, hard to explain, but where does the jurisdiction between the city and Caltrans and possibly the county? I'm not aware about that, but I know with the city and Caltrans, how can, where does the jurisdiction begin between the city, and how, in your opinion, from all your experience so far, could that possibly be changed so that there's a more fluid process between Caltrans and the city?
Yeah, so good question. So let me just talk about the jurisdiction one first, and then let me talk a little bit about the expressway. So we have, within the city of Los Altos, there's a couple different transportation related jurisdictions here. One is Caltrans. Caltrans is largely on El Camino Real. El Camino Real is a Caltrans controlled, it's like a state highway. So anything done on El Camino Real has to go through and with Caltrans. So for example, there was recently, the council has approved policy to put bike lanes, parking removal, and put bike lanes on El Camino Real. We give that policy to Caltrans, and then Caltrans is going to implement that when they repave and resurface the thing. With that said, I think Mountain View is going to be doing some additional things in a stretch of El Camino, one of their stretches of El Camino Real, to put more protected areas of bike lanes in. And that's something more Mountain View is driving. I would have to check if they're physically putting it in, if they're hiring the vendor that physically puts it in, or if they're working with the whole Caltrans resurfacing. But I think they were hoping to do it around the same time. So that's one. And there's other places where Caltrans will hit us on 280 northbound at Foothill off ramp. There's kind of a jurisdictional connection there. And then the County of Santa Clara, and specifically the Roads and Airports Department, controls the expressway in the county. And that's a unique system. So Foothill Expressway is controlled by Santa Clara County. So each expressway intersection that we have has, they don't just control the northbound, southbound, they have right of way into some of the sort of what you would consider a city street. So if you come to my house, for example, like, one side of my driveway is the city and the other side is the county. And these borders are not always very well known. Sometimes if things happen, survey people have to come out, and, there's more pointing fingers to see exactly whose it is. I know where the border is and I'm speaking for myself now, by my house. There are a few other locations where I can see exactly where the border is. Given what I learned about my house, it's the same formula applies. That location up there doesn't fit the formula I have, so I don't know exactly where the borders are between the jurisdictions. With that said, the jurisdictions need to collaborate to sort of have traffic, whatever mode it is, bike, ped, cars, you need to move from one jurisdiction to the next jurisdiction seamlessly and safely. And so the agencies need to coordinate on that. That's my statement. I think I want to back up a second and tell another brief story. Last Tuesday, around 3 o'clock, at the Foothill Expressway crossing, right in the crosswalk on Foothill, a pedestrian was hit. They were going to Lucky's to buy their Thanksgiving groceries, someone from the neighborhood. I am talking about the Foothill crossing of Foothill and Arboretum by Lucky's. The pedestrian went on an ambulance to the hospital. And it's unfortunate that someone was hit. It happened right during school route hours. There was a lot of very panicked moms. And now we have sorrow for, a neighbor who was hit. So what I am saying here is we don't have just one dangerous crossing of Foothill Expressway in this city. We have multiple. And I will speak from a personal perspective now, not as my official perspective. And I'm happy to talk to anybody further about this. but I would encourage anyone who's doing a large advocacy effort for Foothill Expressway to please advocate for everyone in a city and every crossing, every kid that has to go across that expressway to get to school. Because I can tell you stories. I know what's in the collision database. I know what's not. In some of the locations, I know what's happened and that's not in there. And there's a lot of danger at these expressway crossings.
Thanks, and thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts to all the questions. You could tell by the question that I asked that I, of course, fell into the bucket of thinking about those two critical intersections without thinking about the other intersections all along Foothill, which has become an increasingly dangerous, expressway. I now wanted to, right before I open up to the everybody here, there is one question in the chat from Jenny Lear. Stacey, please discuss the dual-use crosswalk accident at Los Altos High School this week, where the student was hit by the car, and I don't know how many people are familiar with that.
So I will say that I can't discuss it because I don't know about it, and I'll certainly ask about it. And I think that what I will say is this is becoming unfortunate because it seems like we're hearing stories every week of somebody being hit. And
this was at Valencia, right at that turn at Valencia and
yeah,
Alma.
Stacey, my poorly stated question is actually the term dual use crosswalk is new to me, and maybe many of us, I mean, I wrote it the way you read it, but as I read the story about this, I just was trying to understand it. And so I wondered if that was the dual use crosswalk, where they came from. Did the Complete Streets Committee have a comment on that within this big report? And additionally, in that same Los Altos High area, because I was on San Antonio Road, and after school, students cross San Antonio Road on their bicycles, turn right, going the wrong way in the bike lane for maybe 100 feet to get to Coronado Avenue, but then they encounter bicycles going the correct way. I mean, there are just some, probably that's just a micro picture of places all over the place.
Yeah. So Ginny, you're talking about Almond Avenue between San Antonio and the high school.
Yes.
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 So I'll just comment on that more generally. And as I said, I know nothing about this.
That's okay. I just read it in the paper.
Collision. Yeah. So there are kids biking to school throughout this city who ride on the wrong side of the road. Quote unquote, the wrong side of the road. Sometimes, the kids could be on the right side of the road. Many times they're on the wrong side of the road because they think it's safer. Many times they're on the wrong side of the road because parents told them to be on the wrong side of the road because parents think it's safer. And again, wrong side of the road in quotes many times. What has gone on Almond Avenue is the notion of trying to change what is the wrong side of the road and put the kids who are on the wrong side of the road on the right side of the road. So what was put in on Almond Avenue between San Antonio and the high school is called a cycle track. Oh. A cycle track is where bicycle traffic can go two ways. And there's also a cycle track planned on Homestead Road, where the Los Altos border ends at Sunnyvale, and we have a nice pathway at the side of the road that's not even on the roadway, that just ends at the creek. And then the kids land on the wrong side of the road and they bike the wrong side of the road to Cupertino Middle School. So the plan is, rather than make them go around to the right side and then back and forth across this busy Homestead arterial road, is to just make a two-way cycle track there. So hopefully that'll be forthcoming. And so I think that that's what the engineers had recommended for Almond Avenue as well, because if they would be on the fire department side, then once they get to the high school, there's no real place for them to cross, and then they're amongst all the cars trying to go there. So the idea was to have them on the same side of the road. And this is practices used in different parts of the country too, is creating these cycle tracks. So the commission was involved in those discussions about the cycle track. We have had a lot of discussions about that, and some members of the public who live near there were involved. Some of the Los Altos High School students and vice principal was involved. And then there was also discussions of putting in a few buffers, like protected buffers. And I haven't been over there lately to see exactly what was in there.
Thanks. It was Jenny. It was a great question. I read the article also, and I was thinking, what? What? It was done on purpose, So, and Stacey, thanks for the answer. One more question that was in the chat was from Adine Miller. Adine, welcome from Los Altos Community Foundation. His question was curious to know if money is a barrier to solutions, or is it political will or jurisdiction ownership, or some combination?
Yeah, great question. It's a combination, and it depends on the different situations. I would say money is a component of every single one of these things, as is staff resources. So it's not just, do we have enough resources to do it? Is not just, do we have enough money? It's, do we also have enough staff people to run the project? And asking vendors and things to help us is good, but then vendors also have to be supervised, and we have to explain what we want. And so there's definitely a resourcing issue. There is also when it comes to something like the Foothill Expressway, there is also I think the county roads and engineering may not necessarily have a lot of bicycle friendly engineers on it for expressways. So that may, become a challenge. However, the county was looking at doing a study for bicycling needs for Foothill Expressway and pedestrian needs, I think, for crossings and things. That came down to money. Unfortunately, that study wasn't funded by Measure B. They applied 2 years ago. They were the first project below the funding line. All the projects above the funding line were in equity priority communities. They were also all projects, no, maybe not the Santa Clara one, the San Jose one. And some of those projects that get funding are from agencies that hire a vendor to help them write the grant application, and also gather community input that can be incorporated in there. I think we haven't had the funding and resources to do that. And so when we apply, or in this case, the county applied for Foothill Expressway, and if we're not an equity priority community, we may not be as competitive in scoring in some of the grant applications. Transportation projects are tremendously expensive. The streets in this city are the biggest asset this city has. Period. And they take money to maintain. And council has this goal, and they've had it for several years, to maintain our PCI, our pavement condition index. I think the goal is maintain it at get it up to 75 and maintain it there. And unfortunately, and I need to remind some of our council members of this in our annual letter to them, is we are not headed up. In the last couple of years, the Bay Area wide report shows we're headed down in our pavement condition index. And once you go too far down, like we did on Fremont Avenue between Grant and the Sunnyvale border, then the cost of maintaining the road goes dramatically up. Transportation costs were going up before the pandemic. Now the inflation feels like it's higher than the grocery store. So they're very expensive projects.
Got it.
Does that answer the question? I also see Councilmember Weinberg, or actually he said he was here in his personal capacity, might want to say something too.
I think there he is. Yeah, Jonathan, do you want to?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to chime in real briefly. Stacey, thank you very much for the presentation you're doing today. I wanted to add on, though, to your answer to Aiden's question about political will, jurisdiction ownership, and money. And of course, you're right that it is a combination of all three, but there's really a fourth component, and the fourth component is the will of the community. The Almond Avenue cycle track, the original plans called for vertical elements. There were going to be bollards that would add an extra level of protection to the cyclists. And the community was really upset about the idea of having that vertical element. So ultimately, the council listened to the community. The bollards didn't go in. It may be something that gets revisited when the community has adjusted to the fact that the cycle track is there, and we've seen what the conditions are now and what the benefits to bollards might be. But that's just one example of how the community is really affecting what the city's accomplishing, whether through the lens of the Complete Streets Master Plan or otherwise. And keep in mind that Los Altos is a community that does not often embrace change quickly. So things that may seem simple or no-brainers in terms of safety, there are different perspectives to it, because if you put something up, it is going to affect someone else, and they may not like the way they are affected. Taking the cycle track again, there are houses along the sidewalk there, and those houses lost they lost all their street parking. That caused some significant complaints from that community, and the council had to deal with that. And that's sort of a microcosm of everything that the council has to deal with whenever one of these projects comes to us.
Jonathan, sorry, Stacey.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah. No problem. Jonathan, thanks for shedding light on that. As it's 9:30, I just wanted to break in here. I do see Janine's hand up, and she'll be the next question. But I wanted to say that that's our official ending time, but we always welcome people to stay if they'd like to, to continue the Q&A. A couple brief announcements. Our next meeting is December 16th, 2 weeks from today, same time via Zoom. The subject's the Los Altos housing element. What's next with Nick Zorns, the Los Altos Development Services Director, and we think it should be a great event, so please attend if you can. And second one, if you'd like to be added to the LACC mailing list, please send an email to info@losaltoscommunitycoalition.org. And this email address is also posted in the chat for your convenience, along with the YouTube channel login. Big thank you to Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for providing LACC with financial and in-kind support. And we also want to express our thanks to Larry Barron for all he does to help us make the videos of these sessions available on our YouTube channel. If you haven't gone there, it's great sometimes to go back and look at prior presentations. Janine.
Hi, Stacey. Thank you for being here. Really informative. My question is kind of a hybrid form. It has to do with the Complete Streets Commission's charter. And it combines two topics. You mentioned that early in the meeting that a previous council cut out the transit scope from your council, and I assume that is still the case. Yes. Okay.
It is currently not in the scope of the master plan, and it's currently not an active project. I think in the 10-year Complete Streets Master Plan, the commission still has a transit element, and we hope, one day to A, get to that project, and B, to ask the council for funding again. But at this point, yeah, it's still in the cutout state.
All right. And then do you have the you mentioned education. I think education is very critical in terms of kids and adults, in terms of writing etiquette, writing rules, writing safety. Does the commission itself have any charter that includes programs around this topic? Or is that outside your charter?
Yeah, that's a good question. So now that the city council has put some funding after many years of parents asking, I was a parent at that point of time when we were asking, we do have a part-time Safe Routes to School education and encouragement coordinator. We contracted them through Alta Planning and Design. So they are trying to coordinate with the school districts. Speaking personally, I wish more was happening, and I wish it was happening faster. The fundamental challenge really is the state does not allow bicycle education to be counted as PE hours. And so there's no motivation for the school districts to have their teachers spend their time, and then and it's the challenge of the unions to add things. And so that's really, in my opinion, where the start of the problem is. If that could be cleared out, I think it would be a lot easier to get the education into the schools. So it's been a challenge. There is a working group that I'm on that includes superintendent from LASD or designee, several other from the different school districts, actually, representatives, principals, Greentown, different people are on that committee.
Okay. Thank you.
And then if I may, David, I would also just like to say to what Jonathan has said, the roads in the city were designed for cars. They were not designed for every mode of transportation. Much of the work, not all of it, but much of the work that's being done today is how do we retrofit our roads to accommodate different modes of users at a time when our streets are dangerous and there's more cut-through traffic coming through our city. So how do we manage it for bicycle and pedestrians? And then how do we manage that vehicle volume coming through as well to make it safe? And this is the challenge. We don't always have space on our current roads for the vehicle lanes, for fully protected bicycle lanes, we don't have sidewalks often in many parts of our city. And so it's a space fight, often over, should we have a parked car or should we have a bike lane? And these are priorities we have to make as a whole. And I think we should make them for the greater good of the whole community. And sometimes that means individual sacrifice. There's a bike lane being added in front of my house, so no street parking. I'm personally having a party because I don't want any of those kids hit. But these are choices the community has to make. And I think the more that we understand what the actual choice is and who's impacted from all different sides, because some people park in front of their house, for example. But I think it is the political will, the community will, and the funding. And the funding, we will not do this alone. We're going to have to get outside dollars, but even council priorities, right?
Thanks, Stacey. Joe.
Yes, Stacey, really enjoying this. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the PCI index. I'll give you just a personal story since I think it's instructive. We've lived here 12 years. Our neighbors have lived here 15, 16 years. Our street is a disaster, one of the lowest PCI scores in the city. And for 2 years, we've been told something's going to be done about it through a rotating series of employees who have left. And, I think there are many other people who might have similar situations. I'm just curious what role, since you mentioned that the Complete Streets Commission does play a role in that, it's a basic fundamental tenet of, government to make sure the water works and the sewer works and the streets are, paved occasionally. What is the expectation for a resident? How often should our streets be getting repaired? You know, is it solely based on condition? Is there a budget issue? Like what's going on there, just for those of us who have been on the low end of the totem pole for a while?
I'm sorry.
Not your fault.
I've heard similar things from other residents in different spots of the city. So I think the first thing I will say in the big picture is we have different types of streets in the city. And that depends on speeds and volumes. So arterial roads like San Antonio and El Camino Real and Homestead Road, and collector streets, whether it be Grant and Fremont and, you know, at Miramonte and places like that. And then we have a unique category called local collector, a couple streets in that category. And then we just have our neighborhood residential streets. So they will all be looked at differently. So basically there is, I think the city every 2 years does a study of looking at the roads and looking at the conditions. And then they have a vendor do it. And then output of that comes a recommendation, some from the vendor input and then some from staff input of which streets are next in the queue for paving. Typically when it's done annually. And typically what they do is they create a list that they're planning to do, and then they create a add to the bid. So if the funds cover the extra streets, they'll do as many as they can. But like anything, the costs of this have gone up. So I think if you want things done sooner, then it needs more money. Definitely. There will be at some point we'll tap out on staff resources and how many streets they're able to do in a year. So the commission largely receives the report from staff about what streets they're planning to do. We typically don't, you know, the condition, these are numbers and recommendations. And then there's also a puzzle of how many miles they can do in a year and geographic distribution and things like that they put together. What the commission's role is, and this is something that we started a couple years ago with Covington, it has been done on Almond, it's going to be done this year on St. Joseph, is rather than just repave these streets and put the striping back exactly where it was for the vehicles, the commission is working with staff to select a couple streets each year where we improve the striping. And then we add some signs to make it safer and better for bicycles and pedestrians. And we are also in many cases also trying to make it safer for vehicles and to limit the speeds in our neighborhood. So there's cases where we will narrow the travel lane and that may slow the vehicles down, because we also hear from residents, cars are going too fast past my house. I don't like that. So there are things that we are also doing for vehicles as part of that striping, and then we add some signs improvement. And I think that this has been an important thing that the commission and the staff have taken on. It has allowed us, Covington, between El Monte and Springer, Almond Avenue, this year's St. Joseph Avenue from Foothill all the way back to Rancho San Antonio. These are examples of streets where we're improving when we do paving, and it's much cheaper for us to do it that way, and we can get a huge stretch of road. And I think the more money that goes into paving and the more that we can then prioritize these segments, the more improvements, simple, low-cost improvements we can get on a greater number of streets for bicycle and pedestrians. And if we hold council to the number of PCI by 75, by 20, whatever, they need to pour a lot more money into streets. So streets like yours, Joe's, can get their turn in a timely fashion.
Thanks, Stacey. Very much appreciate all the information. I think everyone does as well. Gary, you had asked a question in chat. The school district is getting bike skills training into the PE classes. What is the status of that effort? And I didn't know if you felt that was already covered in, Stacey's response to Janine's question.
The status may be a little bit different for Los Altos School District than it is for Cupertino Union School District. At one point, there was some discussions of 1 or 2 schools in Los Altos where 1 or 2 teachers trying some pilots. I don't know the current status. That committee that I sit on with the school districts and staff and the commission and our coordinator in Greentown, that has an upcoming meeting. So hopefully, Gary, we can get more updates there.
Yeah, that meeting is on Wednesday.
Great. Any other questions? Stacey, thank you so much from all of us for a very informative and chock full of information session. This is exactly why we formed LACC, about 5 years ago, to get information out to the public and the residents of Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. So thanks very much. Everybody, thanks for attending. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you on December 16th, same time in the morning, 8:30. And we'll be sending out emails about that, so you'll have the Zoom link. And
Thank you for having me. And not to push the streets topic, but it's my thing. So I'm happy to come back anytime. And I know lots of things about lots of things with respect to the streets.
Well, we're going to put I'll put put it in our list of potential future meetings. It would be good to do. We've sometimes done catch-up meetings where we bring ourselves up to date on what's gone on a topic. So
anyone who goes door to door in the city for campaigning or whatever knows how important traffic is to the average resident in this city. Sometimes the rest of us, we have all our other things going on, but it is near and dear to so many people in this city.
Agree. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.